The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of a chemistry lecture. Daniel Reed was sitting in the third row, scribbling notes about molecular bonds, when his phone buzzed twice. He almost ignored it. He had a quiz on Thursday, and his mind was full of equations. But the second buzz was followed by a strange hum, the kind of hum that made the hair on his neck stand up. He looked at the screen. The message was not from his mother or his roommate. It came from a sender with no name, only a symbol he had never seen before. A circle with 3 lines through it. The message was short. "You have been chosen. Earth has been summoned. Pack 1 bag." Daniel blinked. He thought it was a prank. He set the phone down and tried to focus on his professor. But 10 minutes later, 2 men in dark suits walked into the lecture hall. They were not loud. They did not knock. They simply walked to his row and stopped beside his desk. "Mr. Reed," one of them said, "please come with us." The professor stopped speaking. The students turned. Daniel slowly closed his notebook, picked up his bag, and followed the men out. He kept thinking he had failed some background check or done something wrong with his student visa paperwork. He had not. He was simply the one who had been chosen. In the back of a long black car, the 2 men explained everything. They spoke quietly, as if afraid of being heard, even though no one else was inside. A galactic council had made contact with Earth 6 months ago. The contact had been kept secret. Earth had been invited to take part in something called the Galactic Combat Trials. Every century, each species in the council sent 1 champion to fight in the Crimson Arena. The winner earned trade rights, protected borders, and a permanent council seat. The loser was mocked for decades, taxed unfairly, and treated like a small child. Earth had been given 2 months to choose its champion. Earth had not chosen a soldier. It had not chosen a fighter. It had not chosen a genetically modified superhuman. The committee had run thousands of tests, simulations, and personality scans. They had looked for one quality above all others: patience, the ability to study, the ability to stay calm when everything around you was screaming. The committee had chosen Daniel. He laughed when they told him. He thought it was a joke. Then he saw the photographs of the arena, the previous champions, the bone armor, and the venom claws, and he stopped laughing. "I am a physics student," he said quietly. "I have never even been in a real fight." "We know," one of the men replied. "That is why we picked you." 3 days later, Daniel stepped onto a ship that was not built by any human hand. The hallways were curved and smooth, made of a metal that seemed to breathe. The lights pulsed in slow rhythms. He carried 1 small bag. Inside the bag were 3 notebooks, 4 pens, a small wooden box, and a worn copy of a survival biology textbook. The other champions had already arrived at the arena station when his ship docked. Daniel walked into the reception hall and felt every eye turn toward him. A 7-foot creature with bone armor stood near the window. Its skin was gray and its eyes were yellow. That was the Krellin. Beside it stood a thin shadow with 4 arms and silver blades on each wrist. That was the Vossi assassin. A massive 3-armed warrior with skin like cracked stone leaned against a pillar. That was the Tarn Brute. And glowing softly in the corner, wreathed in a faint orange light, stood the Agari Fire Knight. Daniel walked into the room with his small bag and his glasses slightly crooked. The Krellin ambassador, who stood behind his champion, laughed loudly. "Is this a servant? Where is the human champion?" Daniel adjusted his glasses. "I am the champion." The room exploded with laughter. The Tarn slapped his 3 palms together and shook with deep, booming sounds. The Vossi made a hissing noise that was probably a giggle. The Krellin ambassador wiped a tear from his yellow eye and said, "Earth has sent a child to die. How beautiful. How sad." Daniel did not respond. He simply bowed politely, like he had read in a guide for diplomatic meetings. Then he turned to the Doruan officials, the ancient creatures who ran the tournament. "Excuse me," he said. "May I have a copy of the official rulebook?" The Doruan elder tilted his long head. "The rulebook?" "Yes, the full one. With every clause, every old rule, every footnote. I want to read it before my first match." The elder paused. He could not remember the last time any champion had asked for the rulebook. Most champions were too proud, too eager, too sure of their strength. He waved a long, thin hand, and a thick book appeared on a floating tray. It was heavy. Its pages were yellow with age. Daniel took it with both hands. He bowed again. Then he walked to a quiet corner of the hall, sat down on a low bench, and began to read. The other champions watched him for a moment. Then they turned away. He was not worth their attention. He was a joke. He was already dead. Daniel did not look up. He read carefully. He took notes in his small notebook. The room around him faded as he turned page after page. Hours passed. The other champions left to train. The Krellin ambassador went to his suite. The Doruan elder stood at the doorway, watching the strange human read. Late that night, Daniel finally closed the rule book. He stretched his back, rubbed his eyes, and wrote one short line in his notebook. They never read the rules. He smiled, very slightly, and went to bed. A bell rang somewhere deep inside the arena station. It was a low, slow bell, more like a heartbeat than a sound. Daniel was in the small library on the upper floor, hunched over a thick volume about Vasi anatomy. He had been there since before sunrise, if sunrise even existed in this place. The station had no real day or night. A thin Doran attendant glided into the library on silent feet. "Champion Reed, your match begins in 30 minutes. Daniel nodded without looking up. He finished the paragraph he was reading, marked the page with a folded corner, and closed the book. Then he stood, adjusted his glasses, and walked back to his small room. His opponent had been announced an hour earlier. The Vosi assassin, Sirek of the Black Spires, a creature with 4 arms, 4 blades, and reflexes faster than the human eye could track. Sirek had killed 17 champions in past tournaments. Bookmakers across the galaxy had set Daniel's survival odds at 0.4%. In his room, Daniel opened his bag. He took out the small wooden box. Inside the box, something hummed softly. He had spent the last 2 days preparing. He had asked the Doruan officials many polite questions. He had read the rulebook 3 more times. He had studied Sirek's previous fights on the station's archive. He had also studied something else, something the other champions had not bothered to study. Vasi biology. Daniel walked to the arena entrance. The hallway was long and lined with old stone carvings. Sirek was waiting at the other end of the hall. The assassin was tall and thin, with skin like dark glass. Its 4 arms moved in slow, smooth circles, never still. Its eyes were narrow slits of green light. Sirek looked at Daniel and made a soft hissing sound. It was laughter. A Doruan referee stepped between them. He was old, his face lined with deep grooves. He held a small scanner. "Each champion may bring 1 personal item of cultural significance," he said. "Show your items." Sirek opened all 4 hands. Empty. The assassin trusted only its own blades, which were already part of its body. Daniel held up the small wooden box. The referee took it carefully, opened the lid a crack, and peeked inside. He paused. He frowned. Then he looked at Daniel. "This is allowed?" "Rule 17, Daniel said politely. "A personal item of cultural significance. These are bees. They are very important to my planet. They make honey. They help our crops grow. Without them, much of human food would not exist." The referee blinked slowly. He checked his rule book. He checked it again. He could find no reason to refuse. "Approved," he said at last, and handed the box back. Sirek hissed. The Krellin ambassador, watching from the high seats, leaned forward and laughed loudly. "A child with insects. What will the human do, sting the assassin to death?" The crowd laughed too. Thousands of voices, hundreds of species, all laughing at the small human with the small box. Daniel bowed. He always bowed. It cost nothing. The 2 champions walked into the arena. The crimson sand under Daniel's shoes was warm. The dome above them was open to the stars. The crowd quieted. A horn sounded. Sirek moved first. The assassin became a blur. Daniel had expected this. He did not run. He did not raise his hands. He simply lifted the wooden box and slid the lid open with his thumb. A small dark cloud poured out into the air. Bees, common earth honeybees, 43 of them to be exact. Daniel had counted them himself the night before. The bees rose into the air, confused by the new place, but quickly drawn to motion, and the only thing moving fast in that arena was Sirach. The assassin stopped suddenly. The 4 blades froze in mid-strike. Sirach's narrow eyes went wide. The bees swarmed toward him. What the crowd did not know, and what Daniel had learned from a dusty old text in the upper library, was this. Vossi physiology was sensitive. Their breathing system used 6 small lungs that filtered air through a complex web of fluids. Bee venom, harmless to humans except for a small, painful bump, caused a violent reaction in those fluids. Within seconds, the lungs would swell. Within minutes, the assassin would not be able to breathe. Sirach tried to slash at the bees. Blades did nothing against a swarm. The bees stung the assassin's neck, his hands, his face. Sirach staggered. He tried to run. The bees followed. Sirach dropped to his knees, gasping. His 4 arms trembled. His blades fell into the sand. Then he collapsed. The arena was silent. Completely silent. Daniel walked forward calmly. He held up his hand toward the bees and made a soft humming sound. Most of the bees, confused but tired, drifted toward him. He gently coaxed them back into the box and closed the lid. A few would not come. He let them go. They would die in this strange place, but they had served well. He looked down at Sirach. The assassin was breathing, just barely. Daniel turned to the referee. Medical attention, quickly. He will live if you treat him in the next 10 minutes. The referee stared. So did the crowd. The Krellin ambassador rose from his seat, shaking with rage. This is not combat. This is trickery. I demand the match be invalidated. The Doruan elders gathered. They checked the rulebook. Bees were not weapons. Bees were not technology. Bees were a personal item of cultural significance. The match stood. Daniel bowed to the silent crowd. He bowed to the fallen Sirach. Then he walked out of the arena with the small box humming gently under his arm. In his room, he opened his notebook and crossed off opponent number 1. 4 to go. News of the bee match had spread through the station overnight. By the time Daniel walked to breakfast the next morning, every species in the council was talking about him. Some called him clever. Some called him a coward. Most called him lucky. Daniel did not feel lucky. He felt tired. He had slept only 4 hours. He had spent the rest of the night reading about his next opponent, the Tarn warrior, Grok of the Iron Mountain, a 3-armed mountain of muscle who had won every tournament fight for the last 40 years. Grok had crushed skulls. Grok had broken spines. Grok had once torn a Krellin champion in half with his bare hands. There was no clever rule for Grok. There was no biology trick. The Tarn were tough, simple, and resistant to nearly every common toxin. Their skin was like cracked stone. Their bones were dense. Their hearts beat slowly and powerfully. But Daniel had found something else. Something small. Something he had read in a footnote of an old engineering text. Tarn warriors were heavy. Very heavy. And once their footing was lost, they had a hard time getting up. Their balance system, located in the back of their thick skulls, was simple and slow. Stone-like skin made them strong but also rigid. Daniel had a plan. He spent the morning in the supply room. The arena allowed each champion to request small personal items each match, as long as they were not weapons. Daniel asked for 3 things: a small mirror, a long thin string, a bag of fine white powder. The supply officer, a Doruan clerk with a long pointed beak, looked at the items and frowned. What are these for? Personal use, Daniel said politely. What is the powder? Cornstarch, Daniel said. From Earth. We use it for cooking. The clerk checked his rulebook. Cornstarch was not a weapon. Mirrors were not weapons. String was not a weapon. He stamped the paperwork and slid the items across the counter. That afternoon, Daniel walked into the arena. The crowd was larger this time. Word had spread. Even species that had not bothered to attend the first match were now watching. The bookmakers were nervous. They no longer offered odds on Daniel's death. Some offered odds on his win. Grok stood in the center of the arena. He was massive, 8 feet tall. 3 arms thick as tree trunks. His gray skin had deep cracks across it. His eyes were small and red. He held no weapons. He needed none. The referee inspected Daniel's items. The mirror, the string, the bag of powder. He looked confused but waved them through. The horn sounded. Grok did not waste time. He charged. The ground shook with each step. Daniel ran, but not away. He ran in a wide circle, pulling the bag of powder open as he went. He sprinkled the white powder across the floor in a careful pattern. He had practiced this in his room the night before, marking spots in his head. The powder was light and almost invisible against the crimson sand. Grok roared and changed direction to cut Daniel off. His huge feet hit the powdered area. Daniel had mixed the cornstarch with a small amount of fine arena dust he had collected the day before. The mixture, under the great pressure of Grok's weight, became slick, almost like ice. It was a trick from Earth chemistry, a property of certain fine powders. The other species had never seen it. Grok's right foot slipped first, then his left. His 3 arms shot out for balance, but his body was too heavy. He crashed down onto his back with a sound like a falling building. The arena floor cracked under him. The crowd gasped. Daniel did not waste a second. He pulled out the long, thin string. He ran behind Grok, looped the string around the warrior's massive ankle, then ran to the nearest stone pillar and tied 3 quick knots. The string was thin but strong, made from spider silk fibers. Earth science again. Grok roared and tried to rise. His ankle held. The pillar groaned but did not move. Then Daniel pulled out the small mirror. The dome above was open. The arena's twin suns were high. He angled the mirror carefully and caught a beam of light, then turned it directly into Grok's small red eyes. Tarn pupils were poor at adjusting to bright light. Grok's vision went white. He tried to cover his face with one of his 3 arms but could not see where Daniel was. Daniel stayed calm. He moved to the side, kept the light in Grok's eyes, and waited. Grok struggled for a full minute. He pulled at the string. He kicked at the floor. But every time he tried to rise, the powder under him made him slip again. The string held his ankle. The mirror blinded him. The arena was completely silent. Even the Krellin ambassador had stopped speaking. Finally, Daniel walked slowly toward Grok. He moved in a slight curve, staying out of reach of the warrior's 3 arms. Then he leaned forward and gently tapped Grok on the forehead with 1 finger. It was the formal gesture of surrender request, the most ancient sign in the tournament rulebook. Grok, blind and bound and slipping on his own back, had no choice. He could not break the string. He could not stand. He could not even see his enemy. The warrior, raging, finally tapped his own forehead, the sign of yielded honor. The match was over. The arena stayed silent. Then, slowly, a single sound broke through, a pair of long, thin hands clapping. It was the oldest Doruan elder. He was clapping for Daniel. Then another elder joined, then another. Soon the entire Doruan council was clapping. The other species, confused at first, slowly joined too. Even some of the Tarn delegation, who valued strength above all, but also valued honor, gave a slow nod. Daniel bowed and walked out. 3 more to go. A small bird-like creature delivered the announcement to Daniel's room at dawn. It was a real living messenger, not a hologram. The Doruan officials still preferred old ways for important things. The bird hopped onto Daniel's desk, dropped a sealed scroll, and flew away through the open window. Daniel broke the seal. The scroll listed his next opponent, Vorik, the Agari Fire Knight. He set the scroll down and sat very still for a long moment. He had been studying the Agari for a week now, hoping he would face them last. He did not feel ready, but he never felt ready. That was the point of preparing. The Agari were a species of living fire. Their bodies burned at over 500 degrees. They breathed flame. Their skin glowed orange and red. They were the only species in the tournament that did not need armor or weapons. Their entire body was a weapon. Every champion who had faced an Agari had been turned to ash within minutes. Vorik was the strongest Agari champion in 200 years. His flames were said to be hot enough to melt Krellin bone armor. His fire was so bright it could blind a Vossi from across the arena. 3 previous champions had not even managed to land a single hit before being burned alive. Daniel walked to the window of his small room. The station's twin suns were rising over the curve of the dome. He thought about his options. He had 3 days to prepare. He had the rule book. He had the supply room. He had his notebook. He had also been quietly mapping the arena since his first day here. He knew every pillar, every crack in the floor, every slope. He knew the dome was open at the top. He knew that fresh air came in through small vents along the walls. He knew the air composition was carefully controlled by the Doruan engineers, kept at the same level for fairness. That last detail was important. Very important. For 2 days, Daniel did not sleep much. He read, he took notes, he drew diagrams of fire chemistry. He read about the Igari again and again, and he learned one thing the other species did not seem to know. Igari fire was not magic. It was a chemical reaction. Their bodies produced a substance that mixed with the oxygen in the air to create the constant flame. The reaction needed a specific oxygen ratio to work at full strength. If the air became too humid, the reaction slowed. If the air became cooler, the flames weakened. Igari champions had always fought in dry, hot arenas. Vorik had never fought in wet air. On the morning of the match, Daniel walked into the supply room. He asked for one item, a canister of water. The clerk looked up. Water? Yes, just water, drinking water, mixed with a small amount of salt and sugar. We call it electrolyte solution on Earth. We drink it after exercise. The clerk checked the rule book. Water was legal. Salt was legal. Sugar was legal. He stamped the form and gave Daniel the canister. Daniel walked into the arena. Vorik was already there. The Fire Knight stood in the center, wreathed in slow orange flames. The heat from his body made the air around him shimmer. The Krellin ambassador had moved his seat to the highest balcony, far from the heat. Even the Doruan elders sat behind a thin shield wall. The horn sounded. Vorik raised his arms. A great wave of fire roared toward Daniel. The crowd gasped, expecting the human to burn. Daniel did not run forward. He did not run away. He aimed the canister upward and pressed the spray button. A fine mist of water shot into the air, far above the arena floor. The mist caught the heat from Vorik's flames and rose, then cooled in the upper air, then fell back as a soft rain. Within seconds, the entire arena was filled with humid air. Vorik's flames flickered. The night roared and pushed harder, sending a second wave of fire. But the fire was weaker now. The orange glow dimmed to yellow. The heat dropped by nearly 200 degrees. The crowd murmured. Vorik did not understand at first. He looked at his own arms. His flames were thin. He pushed his body harder, drawing on his inner reserves. The fire grew brighter for a moment, then died down again. The humid air was choking the chemical reaction. Vorik charged forward, trying to reach Daniel before his flames failed completely. Daniel sprayed the canister directly at the knight's joints. The Igari body burned everywhere except at the joints, where the heat was lowest. These were the only conductive points. The water hit Vorik's elbows, his knees, his neck. The salt and sugar in the water made it conduct electricity. Daniel touched the metal canister tip to the metal floor of the arena. He had been collecting static electricity from his clothes all morning, rubbing them on the wool blanket in his room. It was a small charge, tiny, but Vorik was already weakened. The static traveled through the wet floor, up through the wet joints and into Vorik's body. The Fire Knight seized. His flames sputtered. His knees buckled. He fell forward onto the sand. Not dead, just stunned. Daniel walked over carefully. The knight was breathing in short, fast gasps. Daniel knelt beside him, checked the pulse at his neck, and made sure he was alive. Then he turned to the referee. He yields. I do not need to finish him. The referee stared. So did the crowd. Igari did not believe in killing for sport. They believed in honor. They believed in mercy after victory. The Igari delegation, who had been silent and proud, slowly stood up. One by one, they raised their hands and saluted Daniel, the first salute their species had ever given to a non-Igari. The Krellin ambassador slammed his fist on the council table. This must stop. This human is making a mockery of the tournament. I demand he be disqualified for unfair preparation. The Doruan elders did not look at him. They were watching Daniel. Daniel bowed once and left the arena. 2 more to go. The night before the semifinal match, the station felt different, quieter, tense. Even the long stone hallways seemed to hold their breath. Daniel walked alone to the upper observation deck, where a wide, curved window looked out into deep space. He needed to think. He had been reading for too many hours and his eyes ached. The stars outside did not blink. There was no atmosphere here to make them shimmer. They just hung there, cold and steady. A soft sound made Daniel turn. The oldest Doruan elder was standing behind him, leaning on a long, thin staff. The elder's name was Olin. Daniel had spoken with him only once before, briefly, during the rulebook request. "You are not training," Champion Reed. "I am thinking," Daniel said. "That is also training." The elder moved beside him. They stood in silence for a long moment, both looking at the stars. "Tomorrow you face Karath," Olin said quietly. "He is not like the others. He has been watching you. He has studied every match. He brings nothing into the arena because he believes nothing is needed. He is bred from birth in a vat. He has 4 hearts. His skin is bone. His claws hold venom. He is the perfect Krellin." "I know. Do you have a plan?" Daniel was silent for a long time. "I think so." The elder nodded slowly. "Good. Sleep well, human. Tomorrow you will need it." The next morning, Daniel walked into the arena empty-handed. No box, no canister, no mirror, no string, not even his notebook. He had left everything in his room. He wore only his simple shoes, his soft pants, and a thin shirt. The crowd noticed at once. The whispers began. Karoth stood in the center of the arena. He was tall and lean, not bulky like the other Krellin warriors. His gray skin was smooth and tight. His 4 eyes, 2 on each side of his narrow head, watched Daniel without blinking. He had no weapons. His own claws were enough. The Krellin ambassador sat at the front of the high balcony, smiling for the first time in days. Karath had promised him this match would end the human farce. Karath had spent every day since Daniel's arrival watching footage of his matches. He had memorized every trick. He would not be fooled. The horn sounded. Karath attacked instantly. He moved low and fast, claws extended. Daniel did not stand and fight. He turned and ran. The crowd booed. Some species shouted insults. The Krellin ambassador laughed loudly. "The human runs. Where is your trickery now, child?" Daniel ran in a wide circle around the arena. The arena was large, about 200 steps across. He kept his pace steady, not too fast, not too slow. The pace of a long-distance runner. Karath chased him. The Krellin was fast, very fast, but he was running at full speed. His 4 hearts were pumping hard. His bone armor, which was light by Krellin standards, was still heavy. It was made for short bursts of combat, not long chases. Daniel kept running. After 2 minutes, the crowd was confused. Was the human just trying to delay the inevitable? After 4 minutes, Karath was still chasing. He was getting closer. He was furious. After 6 minutes, something changed. Karath's pace slowed by a small amount. His breath was louder. His 4 hearts beat faster, then began to skip. Daniel kept running. This was the secret no Krellin had ever needed to learn. Their species had been bred for power, for speed in short fights. Their hearts were strong, but their lungs were small. Their bone armor was tough, but it added weight. They could fight at full strength for about 10 minutes. After that, exhaustion came hard and fast. Humans were different. Humans were not the strongest species. Humans were not the fastest. But humans had something almost no other species had. Endurance. Long, patient, walking endurance. The endurance of prehistoric hunters who had chased prey across deserts for days. The endurance of marathon runners. The endurance of people who could run and run and run until everything else dropped. Daniel had been running every morning since he was 12 years old. He had run cross-country in high school. He had jogged 5 miles a day in college. His body knew this rhythm. It was easy. Karoth's body did not know it. Karoth had been bred for explosive combat. He had never run for more than 2 minutes in his life. After 8 minutes, Karoth was gasping. His claws shook. His 4 eyes blurred. He tried to slow down and recover, but Daniel slowed too, keeping the same gap. Karoth could not rest. Every time he tried to walk, the human kept moving, just out of reach. After 10 minutes, Karoth's legs began to tremble. After 11 minutes, Karoth fell. He fell to one knee first, then both. His 4 hearts were beating wildly, out of rhythm. His chest heaved. His claws scraped the sand as he tried to push himself up. He could not. His arms shook. His legs would not lift. The arena was silent. Daniel slowed to a walk. He was breathing hard but steady. He was not even close to his limit. He walked over to Karoth and stopped a few steps away. He reached into his pocket. The Kralin ambassador stood up, expecting some final trick. The crowd held its breath. Daniel pulled out a small flask. He had hidden it in his pocket the whole match. He opened the cap, knelt down beside Karoth, and held the flask out. "Drink. It is electrolyte water. It will help your heart settle." Karoth stared at him with blurred, exhausted eyes. "Why?" "Because you are tired, and I am not your enemy. I am only your opponent." Karoth's claws relaxed. He took the flask with shaking hands and drank. The water helped almost at once. His breathing slowed. He looked up at Daniel. Then, with the last of his strength, the Krellin champion raised one trembling hand and tapped his own forehead, the sign of yielded honor. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some shouted. The Krellin ambassador stormed out of the balcony in fury. But the Doruan elders stood. Even Olin bowed his head slightly. Daniel helped Karoth to his feet. They walked out of the arena together, the human and the warrior, neither of them speaking. In his room, Daniel opened his notebook and wrote one short line. One more. A messenger came to Daniel's room at midnight. Not the bird, not a hologram. The oldest Doruan elder himself, Olin, walking slowly with his long, thin staff. Daniel opened the door at the soft knock. He had not been sleeping. He had been reading the rulebook again, for the 7th time. "Champion Reed," the elder said quietly. "Your final opponent has been chosen." "Who?" Olin paused. His old eyes were dark with something Daniel could not read. "Me." Daniel was silent for a long moment. "You?" "My true name is Alis. I am the Doruan champion. I have overseen these trials for 2,000 years. Before I was an elder, I was a warrior. The rules of the tournament require that if no other species can defeat the strongest challenger, the Doruan must send their own champion. You have defeated 4. You have earned the right to face the founder." Daniel closed the rulebook slowly. "I read about this clause. I did not think it would happen. Few do. I have not fought in 800 years, but I will fight you tomorrow." Alis turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You are an unusual human, Champion Reed. I do not know if I will let you live, but I will not insult you with mockery. Sleep well." The next morning, Daniel walked into the arena for the last time. The dome above was open. The twin suns were high. The crowd was the largest it had ever been. Every species in the council was watching. Many had traveled from far star systems to see this match. The Krellin ambassador sat near the front, but he was no longer smiling. He looked nervous. Alis was in the center of the arena. He had removed his elder robes. He wore a simple gray tunic. His long, thin body was strange to look at. He held no weapons, but there was something about him that made the air feel heavy. 2,000 years of skill. 2,000 years of knowledge. He had read the rulebook 1,000 times. Alis bowed deeply. "You are the first human I have met. You honor your species." Daniel bowed back. "I am sorry for what I am about to do." The crowd leaned forward. They expected another trick, another clever item, another biology secret. Daniel did not pull anything from his pocket. He simply walked to the center of the arena, sat down cross-legged on the warm crimson sand, and opened a small, thin book. The rule book. He had brought a copy with him. The horn sounded. Alis did not move. He watched. Daniel began to read, out loud, in a calm, steady voice. He did not read the famous rules. He read the old ones, the ancient ones, the ones written in archaic Doruan script, the ones that had not been spoken in 1,500 years. He had spent the last week translating them with the help of the upper library texts. His voice was slow. His pronunciation was rough, but the words were correct. Alis listened. His 4 eyes grew wide. He had not heard these old words spoken in a very long time. Daniel read for almost 10 minutes. The crowd grew restless. Some species shouted for the match to begin. The Krellin ambassador yelled that this was a delay tactic. The Doruan elders held up their hands for silence. They wanted to hear too. Then Daniel reached a section that no one in the modern era had ever invoked. Rule 1, Clause 9. He read it slowly, in the old tongue first, then translated it into the common speech. If both champions of the final match agree the trial has been honorably completed and neither has caused dishonor, the tournament may end in shared victory. Both species shall be granted equal council rights, equal trade rights, and equal seats at the High Council. The arena shall stand silent for 1 full year in honor of the agreement. Daniel closed the book gently. He looked up at Alis. I do not wish to fight you. I would lose. We both know this. You have 2,000 years of skill. I have books and luck. But more than that, I do not wish to fight you because there is no honor in it. You have already shown me kindness. You called me unusual. You did not mock me. You bowed. He paused. I propose shared victory. I propose that humanity and the Doruan stand together, and that this tournament end not in blood, but in agreement. The rule is in your own ancient book. It is yours. I only read it. The arena was completely silent. Even the Krellin ambassador had stopped speaking. Alis stood very still for a long moment. His 4 eyes blinked slowly. Then his old face changed. The hard line of his mouth softened. A sound came from his throat. A deep, warm sound that no one in the arena had heard in 2,000 years. He laughed. He laughed long and loud, his thin shoulders shaking, his staff trembling in his hand. The crowd watched in shock. The Doruan elders, who had been frozen in surprise, slowly began to smile. When Alis finally stopped laughing, he wiped one of his eyes with a long, thin finger. Granted, Champion Reed, granted with all my heart. He walked across the arena, slowly, with great dignity. He stopped in front of Daniel and bowed deeply, lower than any Doruan had ever bowed to any other species. Daniel stood and bowed back, just as deep. The crowd erupted. Cheers from 1,000 throats, in 100 languages. Even species that had laughed at Daniel a week earlier were now standing and cheering. The Krellin ambassador sat in his seat, pale and silent. 3 weeks later, Daniel returned to Earth. He refused every interview. He went back to college. He finished his physics degree the next spring. He never spoke publicly about the tournament, though governments around the world tried many times to get him to talk. He simply went quiet, married a kind woman from his physics class, and became a teacher. Humanity was given its permanent council seat. Earth was protected. The trade routes opened. The mockery stopped. Far across the galaxy, on a small Krellin colony world, a young Krellin child sat in her bedroom and read a book by lamplight. The book was new and popular. It was titled, The Arena Expected a Monster. The cover showed a thin figure with glasses, sitting in a circle of crimson sand, reading. The book ended with one line, written in plain, simple text on the very last page. Humanity sent a student, and the student studied us all. The child closed the book softly, hugged it to her chest, and went to sleep with a small smile on her face. The end.